I recently did a video on the EnGenius EWS357AP Wi-Fi 6 access point and went through the setup on a single access point using their mobile app. The app truly doesn't support multi-access point configurations, so in today's video, we're going to cover how to set up a multi-access point using 2 access points and a Skykey. If you want to learn more about how to use the Skykey to configure the EnGenius access points, then stick around for the rest of this video. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe and hit that notifications icon so you'll be notified when there's new content. Being a longtime UniFi user, I was really interested in other similar products, and looking at the EnGenius offerings, you can't help but draw some similarities. Their indoor product offerings are almost identical in specs, and just like Ubiquiti, they offer both a standalone controller and a free downloadable software controller that you can run on your PC or your Mac. I wanted to try these for 2 reasons. First, I'm always looking to see if they could offer better performance. Secondly, the cost of 2 access points and a controller is significantly cheaper than what Ubiquiti is charging, not to mention that they're actually available. It's been kind of hard to get UniFi Wi-Fi 6 devices, as they're always out of stock. Before we get into the setup and testing, I want to briefly cover the hardware on the EWS357AP and the Skykey 1 controller. In addition, I'll link to the previous video that I did on the EWS357 access point. So I'm not going to go over all the specs of the EWS357AP because they're very similar to the ones that I've already reviewed on the 357AP. The key differences are this is a 4x4 access point and it's capable of combined speeds up to 3600 megabits per second. This isn't going to increase the performance of a single connection. This is just the total combined speed of the access point being a 4x4. The other thing that's different is this has got a 2.5 gigabit per second PoE port versus the 1 gigabit that's on the 357. Again, this isn't going to make a huge difference in a home application, but if you've got a lot of users that you're pumping through this and you're taking advantage of the 4x4, it will make a difference overall. The Skykey has an ARM A7 quad-core processor and supports hardware encryption acceleration. It has a gigabyte of RAM and 4 gigs of storage. It also has 2 1 gigabit RJ45 ports, of which one of those is a PoE, and it has a micro SD slot so that you can perform your backups. There's also a DC input jack, a reset button. EnGenius is using almost the same approach to UniFi, meaning that if you want to set up and deploy 2 or more access points and keep them updated and synchronized, you have to use either a free downloadable controller software or a hardware controller which bundles the software already in it. Let's walk through a basic setup using 2 access points and see how the process is done. I'm going to use the EWS357AP that I did a video on recently, and we'll use the 377AP, which is the larger 4x4 version. We'll set these up using a Skykey controller running the ezMaster software, but remember you can just download the ezMaster software and run it on a PC or a Mac if you don't want to purchase a controller. The first thing you need to do is launch the web interface of the Skykey. To do this on a controller, you'll need to go to your router and look up the DHCP address, or you can access it by using the default 192.168.1.250 IP address. I just always find it easier to look up the address on my router. Once you found the IP address, you can log into the ezMaster software and start setting up your Wi-Fi network. The instructions say to log in using admin as the default password and username. However, I had to use admin password as the default login. Once you log in, you're prompted to register an email address to be used with the admin account. In the admin account screen, you need to put in your new password, name, country, email address, and give the device a name. As this section applies mainly to the controller, going down the left, you can see some additional options. You can add users. Jumping down to backup and restore, this is where you can actually back up your device or restore it from either a PC or an SD card if you've put one in. Next, you need to set the time zone, and going down to the software upgrade section, this is where you can upgrade the ezMaster software when they release new versions. Below that is the one-click update for all of your access points. We'll cover more on that later because there is a couple issues with that. So once you finish that section, though it's not real obvious, you need to create a new project. Think of a project as a building, home, location. On the project page, just create a new project and give it a name, and you'll be prompted that you'll be directed to the device configuration screen. On the device configuration screen, you should see all the access points. They'll appear in the pending approval section as they haven't yet been adopted to the system. Select all the access points and just click on Add. This is where it gets a little strange because all you're doing here is really adding the access points to the controller, but they haven't yet been set up as a group. It'll take a while, really too long in my opinion, but once they're adopted, you'll see that they are both listed. However, if you look at the group section, it's still blank. To be able to manage both of these and have your settings synchronize across all your access points, you need to create an access point group by clicking on Device Management, then AP Groups, and then create a new group. This is where the power starts, and this is where we'll be doing most of the work. Just give it a group name with an optional description, and next we'll go into the member setting. Currently, all we have done so far is add the access points to the controller. But here we'll actually add the access points from the controller to a group, so they can be managed as a group. Click on Add and select the access points that you have available, and then click on Confirm. We'll want to make a few more changes on this screen before applying everything to the group. So under wireless radio settings, you'll need to set your country code, the HT mode, which stands for high throughput, and you can always change these later. If you're not sure, just leave the defaults. You can leave the channel selection on auto for now. I usually set the power output to low or medium when using multiple access points. And again, you can always change this later. And this is one of the few settings you can actually change independently, and we'll get into that a little bit. Next, we need to set up our SSID. EnGenius allows you to create up to 8 SSIDs against the group, which is twice what Ubiquiti allows. The first SSID we're going to create will run both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz under the same name. So I'm going to go ahead and check those off and then click on SSID 1. Here we can change the name and customize a variety of settings that are specific to this SSID. The most important thing, of course, is to scroll down to the bottom and change the security section. This is where we're going to set the password for the SSID. I'm going to use WPA2 and WPA3 and input my password. Click Save and you can see now that you have a test network in the first slot. You can create additional wireless networks such as a 2.4 or 5 gigahertz dedicated, or you can attach an SSID wireless network to a VLAN. Click on Apply and write all your changes to the group. It'll take a while to update, but if we click on Device Management, again, we can see that both access points are getting updated. And if we look to the right, under Group, we can see that they are now part of the group that we created. As I mentioned, the update process is slow and it'll take a while to write all the updates, but when it's completed, you should see this screen. Even though it lets me click on access points individually, because they're being managed by the group, there's really only a few things that I can do because I actually have to manage everything through the group. Mainly all I can do is change the IP address and overwrite the group settings for channel output and power output. Changes to the SSID, passwords, and other settings all need to be made in the AP group section like we did before. One issue I ran across after setting up multiple access points was when I would check the active clients. The information was incomplete and pretty useless. The client names did not show up and it was missing IP addresses for many of the clients. When I attached approximately 27 devices, the majority were missing information. I reached out to their tech support, but they weren't much help. So I looked for updates and found that there was a firmware update that on paper seemed to address some of what I was seeing. The firmware process on EnGenius is pretty straightforward. Go into the global settings, click one-click update, and select check for updates. Select all the updates you want to install and just hit update. Again, this process is extremely slow, so you'll need to wait for this to complete. After the firmware was installed, I went back to review my clients list and things did improve. However, it still did not pick up the client names correctly, especially on iOS devices. Though this isn't a showstopper, it's frustrating when you're trying to troubleshoot something or keeping an eye on devices that are connected. Since you can't create an alias, as you can with UniFi, you're pretty much stuck with whatever's displayed on this list. What you're seeing here is when all the access points were connected to the same switch. When I attached one of the access points to another PoE switch on the other side of the house, the list went completely blank. I did try another set of access points just to make sure it wasn't hardware related, and I pretty much got the same results. As you'll see from the testing, performance between the EnGenius and the UniFi products are comparable to each other with no real standouts in speed. Though the approach that EnGenius is using is very similar to that of Ubiquiti, and the speed is about the same, it's not nearly as polished or user-friendly. And it's painfully slow doing any updates or changes to the access points. I could live with them being slow because you don't typically make that many changes in your Wi-Fi configuration, but the issue with the client list is a problem for me, and in my opinion, that's part of the basic needed functions. Given the significant cost difference between EnGenius and UniFi, you have to decide if these issues I mentioned are showstoppers for you. But overall, the UniFi experience is much smoother, more user-friendly, and much faster. Most importantly, I can see what's on my client list. I was really hoping to gain some performance with these devices, but in truth, there isn't any, so for me there's no incentive to switch, then I'll be sending these back. The hardware itself is really good, and all the issues I found are in the software and could be addressed in a future software or firmware release, but it's unknown if and when they'll be addressed. If you're using only a single point, or you can live with some of the issues until they get corrected, then you still may want to consider these as the cost is much less, and unlike UniFi, you can actually buy these and they're readily available. If you can't live with these issues, or if you're a current UniFi user, then these may not be a good choice for you. Anyway, that's about it for today's video. Please give it a like if you found it useful. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.